Your body lay sunk into cold silk sheets, and a headache pulsed in your temples as though someone were driving a nail into your skull. This was not your room, nor did it smell like your home. You rose slowly, the wooden floor groaning beneath your bare feet. The round window in the wall revealed a velvety darkness, but no, it was not the ordinary darkness of night. It was the darkness of the Atlantic Ocean, stretching without end, shards of silver moonlight breaking across its surface. Then suddenly the floor trembled, a faint vibration, violent in its gentleness, like someone brushing past and nudging your shoulder. A clock stood on the table. It showed 9:50. Your steps quickened as you rushed into the corridor. Luxury seized the eye. Crimson velvet carpets, crystal chandeliers swaying gracefully with the movement of the ship. Oil paintings of sea goddesses. But why was everyone walking calmly? Why was the steward smiling as he carried a tray of tea? Couldn't they feel that trembling beneath their feet? You hurried to the stern deck. The cold air struck your face harshly. The sea was calm, oily, black as ink. On the deck, an elderly man played a slow melody on a violin, while a woman in a white fur coat leaned against the railing, listening. Everything was perfect. Everything was beautiful. Beautiful in a terrifying way. You looked at your watch. 9:55. Then you heard it. A muffled rumble, not loud, like someone dragging a massive anchor across the bottom of an iron basin. The man paused for a moment, looked at the sea, then shrugged and resumed playing. But you felt it. You felt that vibration spreading through the bones of the ship like a fever. You hurried back inside. You climbed the stairs toward the bridge, but a well-dressed officer with a thick red mustache blocked your way. "Can I help you, sir?" "What happened?" you asked hoarsely. "That sound." The officer smiled broadly. "We encountered a piece of ice, nothing more. Everything is under control. Return to your cabin and enjoy the voyage." He spoke with the confidence of graves. You looked at your watch. 9:57. You burst into the wireless room. A heavy wooden door. Behind it, a young man wearing large headphones tapped rapidly on a telegraph machine. On the wall, a large clock showed 10 p.m. "You must send a distress call," you shouted. He looked at you in annoyance. "What? Who are you?" "The ship is sinking. Within 2 hours, it will be at the bottom." The young man laughed nervously. "Are you drunk? The ship is unsinkable. Look around you. This is Titanic." You stopped. Titanic. The word echoed in your head like a gunshot. Of course you knew. You had known from the moment you saw the swaying chandeliers and heard the distant music. You had known when you looked into the darkness of the ocean. You knew everything. You looked at your watch. 9:59. You ran. You ran with all the strength you had. Through the luxurious salons where ladies played cards and drank champagne. Through the restaurants where men smoked cigars while reading newspapers. Across the grand staircases where a quartet stood playing a mournful ragtime tune. You descended to the lower decks. The air was different here. The corridors narrower, the lights dimmer, the smells heavier. Coal, sweat, machinery. Then you heard a sound you had not heard above. Water. Water rushing violently like an underground waterfall. You opened a heavy iron door. There, in the baggage hold, black water poured through a crack in the hull at a terrifying speed, with insatiable hunger. The water devoured leather trunks and wooden crates, rising slowly, frighteningly slowly. While above you, the musicians played and the officers smiled. You climbed the stairs again, your heart pounding violently. On the upper decks, life continued. You met a young woman holding a child to her chest, gazing dreamily at the sea. "You must go to the lifeboats. Now." She looked at you in surprise. "But nothing has been announced. My husband said it's only a drill." "There is no time. Believe me, there is no time." You looked at your watch. 10:10. 1 hour and 50 minutes remained. You took her hand and led her toward the lifeboats. The sailors were tying ropes and talking calmly, but no one was boarding. Passengers watched, laughed, posed for photographs beside the boats. Do you see that iceberg? How beautiful it is in the moonlight. You looked at the horizon. There, only a short distance away, the iceberg towered, deadly white, dripping with pure malice. The woman climbed into the boat hesitantly, searching for her husband with her eyes. She looked at the child in her arms, then back at you. Thank you. You nodded and ran to the other side. Time was closing in. You looked at your watch. 10:30. 1 hour and 30 minutes remained. You tried to convince the others. Fat businessman refused to leave because he had forgotten his coat. A young bride and groom danced to the violin. A senior officer shouted at you for causing panic without reason. Listen to me, you shouted. This ship will sink. In an hour and a half, nothing will remain but memory. But their eyes told everything. Pity. Disdain. The look that says, this man is mad. Even the woman you saved looked at you from the lifeboat as if she were beginning to doubt. You looked at your watch. 10:50. 1 hour and 10 minutes. Then what you feared happened. A slow tilt. Gentle. Almost imperceptible. A champagne glass rolled across a table. A chandelier swung too far. The musicians paused for a moment, then resumed. Slightly faster, like men chasing a fleeing melody. You climbed to the highest point of the ship. The stern. You stood there alone, looking at the black ocean. The stars glittered with indifference. The wind played its cold melody. Below, the liner shone. Thousands of glowing windows, each window telling a story. A dream. A fear. A love. A waiting. You looked at your watch. 10:55. 1 hour and 5 minutes. You began to hear the screams. Not yet the screams of terror, but the screams of astonishment. Whistles sounded. Officers shouted orders. Children cried. Passengers flooded onto the deck, wearing coats over their night clothes. They were beginning to understand. They were beginning to believe. Below, the violinist played, Nearer, my God, to thee. Slowly, reverently, as if in prayer. You looked at your watch. Shi Dian Ling. Wu Fen. 55 minutes. You returned inside. Not to save anyone. There was no longer time for that. But to witness. You walked through empty corridors while water seeped beneath the doors. You passed the dining hall, where tables were still laid with white porcelain plates and crystal glasses. You stood before a grand piano and pressed a single key. One note split the silence, then faded away. In one cabin, the door stood open. On the bed lay an unfinished letter. My dear Mary, the sea tonight is as beautiful as your eyes. I will see you soon. You looked at your watch. 11:30. 30 minutes. You went to the deck for the last time. The scene had become hell. Boats were lowered half full. Women screamed farewells to their husbands. Men crowded the opposite side. People jumped into the black water. The cold was unbearable. The cold of graves. The air whistled in your ears. The water reached your feet now. Cold. Knife cold. The ship was breaking apart. The shriek of iron tore at the ears. The lights flickered on and off like the breath of a dying man. You looked at your watch. 11:55. 5 minutes. You stood at the edge. The moon illuminated the shimmering water with thousands of silver sparks. Below, people struggled and screamed, clinging to one another. Beside you stood the old man who had played the violin 2 hours earlier. He no longer held his instrument. He stared at the sea and waited. Beautiful, isn't it? He said quietly. You looked at him. He was smiling. The smile of a man who knows the secret. Yes, you whispered. Very beautiful. You looked at your watch. 11:59. 1 minute. The water reached your waist, tearing at your skin with its cold. The ship split in two. The bow sinking slowly, the stern rising high into the air. The screams were deafening. Thousands of voices mixed with the shriek of escaping steam. Then you lifted your head toward the sky. The stars still glittered. Cold, distant, beautiful. You looked at your watch. Midnight. 0.